Okay, we're back with Thomas Taylor's dissertation, I guess, on Aristotle's philosophy. And we've been in the middle of a long quotation from Simplicius, where Simplicius is expanding on a comment by Aristotle, in which Aristotle says that the ancients disagreed on first principles in various ways. Either the first principle was one and finite, or one and infinite, or many and finite, or many and infinite, I think was the fourfold division. But Simplicius is interpreting it in a way that the ancients were generally agreed. He's done that especially for Anaxagoras, Empedocles, Pythagoras, and the Eleatics, but hasn't really done it as much for Democritus and Leucippus, the atomists, which wouldn't be surprising because Plato is known to have like an animosity towards Democritus. But it's not yet clear exactly how deep Simplicius situates that underlying unity of the ancients. Like, are all of them included, or are there some exceptions like Democritus? So now he's talking about Anaxagoras. And another thing is he mentioned that the apparent differences are partly because these different thinkers addressed different aspects of the total philosophy. Some talking about more like primal principles, some more proximate principles. So that accounts for some of the differences, and even quoted Aristotle, saying even Aristotle kind of alludes to that. So picking up right here. This is what Anaxagoras says concerning the mixture and things of similar parts, the previous section. But concerning intellect, he writes as follows. Intellect is infinite and self-ruling and is mingled with nothing, but it is itself alone by itself. For if it were not by itself, but was mingled with anything else, it would participate of all things, for in everything a part of everything is inherent, as I have observed before. So interesting. Is this an actual quote from Anaxagoras? I didn't realize there was a real fragment like that preserved, but okay. A lot of stuff is preserved only in Simplicius. Simplicius is exhaustive in citing his sources and quoting them. As I have before observed, and the things mingled with it would be an impediment to its similarity ruling over all things, so that it subsists alone by itself. It is indeed the most attenuated and the purest of all things. I guess as in, like, rarefied, like in the Phaedo. Higher, like, more morally perfect realms have more rarefied elements, constituting air, water, etc. I'm getting a sore throat. It is indeed the most attenuated and the purest of all things, and possesses a universal knowledge of everything and the greatest power. It likewise rules over all such things as have a soul and are greater and less. So there's a lot of Platonic terminology here in the Anaxagoras quote. I'd be curious, how confident are we that this is genuinely stuff that Anaxagoras wrote directly? The greater and the less, of course, Plato associates with the column of the indefinite dyad and the philebus. So, okay. Everything, too, that comprehends, and of course, in that dialogue, intellect or mind is the principle of mixture of that which is limited and that which is unlimited. So it makes sense that intellect would rule over all things that have or participate of the greater and the less. Everything, too, that comprehends is subject to its dominion, so that it even comprehends the principle itself. And first of all, indeed, it began from that which is small, to exercise its comprehending power, but afterwards it comprehended more and more abundantly. Intellect also knew all that was mingled together and separated and divided together with what they would be in future, what they had been, and what they are now. All these intellect adorned in an orderly manner, together with this circular enclosure which now consists of the stars, the sun and the moon, the air and the ether, which are separated from each other. It likewise separated the dense from the rare, the hot from the cold, the lucid from the dark, and the dry from the moist. There are many parts, indeed, of many things, but in short, no one thing is separated from another except intellect. Every intellect, too, is similar, both the greater and the less, but no other thing is similar to another. Since, however, many things are inherent in one thing, each individual is and was manifestly these. Simplicius. But that he admitted that there is a twofold order, one intellectual and the other sensible, proceeding from the intellectual, is evident from what has been said, and is also evident from what follows. Quote, but intellect was in the highest degree such things as these, and now is, that everything else might subsist in that which comprehends a multitude, and in conjunctions and separations. End quote. Having likewise said that there are many and all various things in all the mixtures, and the seeds of all things, possessing all various ideas, colors, and pleasures, and that men are mingled together, and other animals endued with soul, he adds, quote, with men also cities are conjoined, and works are provided, such as are with us. They have also a sun and moon, and other things such as we possess. The earth also affords them many and all various productions, which are used by them after they have brought them into their habitations as things most advantageous. Interesting. This quote is kind of mysterious. Why is he saying they also have a sun and a moon? Is he talking about other, like, groups of men? Kind of odd. We'll just kind of keep going with it for now. Simplicius, and that he obscurely signifies another order of things, different from that which is with us, is evident from his saying not only once, such as are with us. Likewise, that he did not conceive that sensible order to precede this in time is evident from the words, quote, are used by them after they have brought them into their habitations as things most advantageous, end quote. For he does not say they were used by them, but they are used by them. Neither does he speak as with reference to certain other habitations which resemble the constitution of things with us, for he does not say there is a sun and moon with them just in the same manner as there is with us, but, quote, that they have a sun and moon as we have. Whether, however, these things are so or not deserves to be investigated. So maybe he's not talking about other groups of mortals, but about like the intellectual versus sensible realm, and they also have habitations and a sun and a moon in the intellectual realm, which seems kind of odd. I got the impression that's what Simplicius was getting at in the rest of this paragraph, but I don't want to get hung up on it, so we're just going to keep going. But Empedocles asserted that there is one principle and many finite principles, a periodical restoration of things, and generation and corruption, according to commixture and separation, as is evident from the following verses in the first book of his Physics. Quote, from Empedocles, twofold, I say, for now from many one alone increased, and then the many from the one arose, and mortals were assigned their birth and their decay. For this the congress of the whole of things led forth to light, and when produced, destroyed, and this, when forms have into life emerged, again divides them into parts minute, and gathers them again. These two, throughout, diversified, are doomed to endless change. All things in union now through love conspire, and now through strife, divulsed, are borne along. Hence, when again emerging into light, the one is seen, 'tis from the many formed. All mortals, too, so far as they are born, of permanent duration are deprived, but as diversified with endless change, through this unmoved forever they remain, like a sphere rolling round its center firm. But to a fable listen, for the wit, ebriety, increases. As before, a fable I announced, again I say that these are twofold. At one period, hence, one thing alone from many was increased, and at another many rose from one. Fire, water, earth, and air immensely high, with strife pernicious from the rest apart, and each possessed equality of power, while love in these had equal length and breadth. But to my words, devoid of guile, attend, for all these equal are, and equal in their birth, and nothing adventitious is, or ever fails. Okay, I don't know what ebriety means.
The condition of being drunk.
Oh, okay. Like inebriated. Cool. Simplicius. In these verses, he says that there is one thing from many, i.e., from the four elements, and that at one time friendship has dominion, and at another strife. For that neither of these entirely fails is evident from his asserting that all things are equal, and of an equal age, according to their birth, and that nothing is adventitious or fails. And not only friendship is one, but strife also is reduced to one. Asserting also many other things, he adds the character of each of the above-mentioned particulars, calling fire the sun, air splendor in heaven, and water rain and the sea. That he also obscurely signified a twofold order, the one intelligible and the other sensible, and the one divine, but the other mortal, of which the former has the relation of a paradigm, and the latter of an image, is evident from the following verses. Empedocles, dark and tremendous rain in all is seen, but trees and solids from the earth are poured. In wrath, all biformed natures separate lie, but in love mingling for each other burn. For these, what was, is, will be, is derived. From these trees blossom, men and women spring, beasts, birds, and fishes that in water live, and long-lived gods transcendently renowned. Simplicius. For in these verses, he not only says that generated and corrupted natures are composed from friendship and strife, but also the gods themselves. From the following verses also, he may be supposed obscurely to signify a twofold order. So the twofold order is signified because he mentions the gods? That's the only thing that was directly pointed to. But alright. In their own parts, all these enveloped lie, the sun, the earth, the heavens, and the sea, with all that is adapted to be formed in mortal realms, in temperament besides, all that were more sufficient to themselves, Venus as similarly formed, conjoined, but hatred from each other far apart divides them in their temperament and source, and forms resemblant, since to coalesce is to them strange and bitter in the extreme, for born themselves from strife, and offspring they desire. So how does this signify that Empedocles also had the idea of the intelligible versus sensible realm? For he manifests that these things are adapted to mortal natures, but in intelligibles they are more united and adhere to each other, being rendered mutually similar by Venus. He also shows that these are everywhere, but that intelligibles are assimilated by friendship, and sensibles subdued by strife, and that being divulsed far apart from each other in their origin and temperament, they subsist in forms resemblant, which have the relation of images and are produced by strife, and are unaccustomed to be united to each other. But that Empedocles also admitted generation, according to a certain mixture and separation, is evident from what he says in the beginning, quote, "For now, from many, one alone increased, and then the many from the one arose." Okay, so Simplicius's take on Empedocles actually holding that there was the intelligible versus sensible realm is pretty clear from what he's saying, I don't know how well supported it is by the fragments of Empedocles. I could kind of take or leave that interpretation. It's, I think, just sufficient to know that Simplicius believed that Empedocles and Anaxagoras, and obviously the Eleatics and Pythagoras, all held a doctrine very similar to that of Plato. Okay, so now moving on, chapter 6. I assume this is back to Thomas Taylor. So, yeah, Taylor, chapter 6. Let us in the next place direct our attention to the doctrine of the Stagirite, concerning that last and most obscure of all things, matter, previously observing that he establishes three principles of natural things, viz., matter, form, and privation, and that from the following arguments. Every generation is the production of something, through which a thing begins to be that which it was not before. Hence, that which is produced de novo is the boundary to which generation tends and is called form. Okay. Alright, so what is produced de novo is called form. Every generation is the production of something through which a thing begins to be that which it was not before. So, like, form is a limiting condition or a boundary to which generation tends when something is created de novo. I'm not following entirely here, but let's keep going. Since, however, we cannot conceive anything to be generated de novo unless it had not a prior existence, hence it is necessary that a privation of the form to be produced should precede generation, which privation is the term or boundary from which generation proceeds. Okay, because being produced de novo is impossible, the form that is eventually instantiated had to have some kind of prior existence, and the privation of that previously existing form is also a principle, therefore, so form, matter, and privation, if I'm reading this correctly. And because nothing can be generated or produced by the power of nature from nothing, hence a third thing is requisite, from which form itself may be generated, and into which it may be received, which principle of generation is called matter. Okay. Hence, we infer that there are three principles of natural things, of which form and privation are opposite boundaries, but matter is the common subject of each. Okay, I'm not quite grasping this threefold division or the triune principle of things: form, matter, privation. So let's just review this argument again from here. Every generation is the production of something through which a thing begins to be that which it was not before. Okay, hence, that which is produced de novo is the boundary to which generation tends and is called form. So this is I don't see the connection here, or how this follows, or what exactly is being said even. Whatever is produced de novo, but then he says we can't imagine anything to be produced de novo, but it would be, if it could be produced, the boundary to which generation tends, since we can't imagine creation ex nihilo, let's call it, which is more familiar, unless it had not a prior existence. Hence, it is necessary that privation of the form to be produced should precede generation, which privation is the term or boundary from which generation proceeds. Okay, so you have form or privation of form, because form can't be produced de novo, so you go from privation to form, and matter contains both privation of form and the presence of form. So basically, like, this is expanding the Platonic conception of matter in two, so dividing out privation and the matter as substrate, whereas in most Platonists you have matter being a kind of pure privation. So matter is that principle of privation. They're not separate. We'll keep going. And because nothing can be generated or produced by the power of nature from nothing, hence a third thing is requisite, from which form itself may be generated, and into which it may be received, which principle of generation is called matter. Okay, so in both cases, we need the privation to pre-exist because the form has to come from something, and then we need matter also to exist because the form has to come from something and be constituted by something. So the fact that the arguments for matter and the argument for privation are totally symmetrical makes me think that it's totally fine to condense them into a single principle, privation slash matter, matter as privation of form. But here, Taylor's characterizing Aristotle as treating matter more as a basic substrate. Hence, we infer that there are three principles of natural things, of which form and privation are opposite boundaries, but matter is the common subject of each. And maybe there's something to that, but okay. Next quote. From where? Where is this quote coming from? I suppose this is Simplicius. The subject nature, then, i.e. matter, says Aristotle, may be scientifically known according to analogy, for as is the brass to the statue, or the wood to the bed, or matter and that which is deprived of form to anything else which possesses form before it receives form, so is this subject nature to essence, to this particular individual thing, and to being. This, therefore, is one principle, though it is not one nor being in such a manner as this particular individual thing. So matter itself doesn't have the same kind of subsistence as particular individuals. Another principle is form, and farther still, the contrary to this, privation. But with respect to these, how they are two, and how they are more than two, has been declared above. In the first place, therefore, it has been said that principles are contraries only, and in the next place, that it is necessary something else should be admitted as a subject, and that there should be three principles. Okay. So form, privation, matter. I don't know how I haven't run into this before. Does Aristotle address it in the Physics? I don't even. I suppose he must have. But all right, back to Taylor. As Aristotle's doctrine on this subject is admirably elucidated by Simplicius, and as he also again unfolds to us the treasures of antiquity, I shall present the reader with his commentary on the above citation. Okay, well, the above citation, though, I thought was Simplicius. So where is this quotation coming from? That's okay. We're going back to Simplicius, elucidating further the nature of this triune principle. All right, so as the paradigms of matter here proposed, try that again. As the paradigms of matter here proposed, as for instance man and seed, and anything else of this kind, although they have the relation of matter to things which are generated, yet are themselves also certain forms. Everyone will be desirous to learn what the subject matter itself to forms will be by itself. Okay, so I think he's just saying, we know matter by the way that things serve as gross matter for gross objects like clay to the vessel, or something of that nature. But what is matter fundamentally, essentially, because the clay itself does have a form. Okay, so what is that matter by itself? For let seed be the matter of man, blood, if it should so happen, of seed, of blood, meat and drink, and of these the four elements. But since these also change into each other according to contrary qualities, they are entirely indigent of a certain common subject, which has no quality in its own nature. for qualities are forms and opposite forms. Okay, so there has to be something besides form which allows forms to move between their opposites in things, fine. If, therefore, all knowledge which subsists according to affirmation is of things circumscribed, which possess a certain character and become definite through quality and form, but the subject to forms and qualities ought to be entirely void of quality and formless. If this be the case, a thing of this kind will be, says Aristotle, known in a certain respect by analogy to other things. Okay, so what is known is formal. Matter is not formal, but we can still know it by its analogy to the way that different levels of form are kind of stacked. So that's fine. Plato talks about how we can know matter by a kind of spurious reasoning. All right. For as brass is to a statue, or wood to a bed, or that which is formless before it receives form to anything else artificial which possesses form, so in physical things is the first matter to essence and being. But Aristotle very properly takes his paradigm from things artificial, since in these also the formless proceeds according to time and is of itself visible. Essences also, or substances, are the subjects of other things, but matter is the subject of substance. That's a pretty helpful formulation. Yeah, so he treats matter as a substrate, more so than Plato does, perhaps, because he distinguishes privation as a separate principle from matter, whereas Platonists kind of group privation and the substrateness of matter together. And yet Aristotle also treats substances, which is ousias, the first category of all the categories, right? You go substance, and then I think quantity, then quality, etc. So substance is that of which things are predicated, and so it is the substrate. Substances are substrates of all the accidental properties that things have. One second. Oh, man. Okay. Excuse me. Right. So substances do act as a substrate, but then matter is the substrate of substance. So a substance can act as matter in a certain sense for its properties, just like clay can act as matter for the pot, but the fundamental matter is if you keep going down and go to the substrate of the substrate to like the substrate or subject itself. I think substrate is probably a better term than subject to use here, but all right. It is, however, Tomer?
So can we say that matter is the extension principle for substance, for any substance like clay, stone, wood?
What do you mean the extension principle?
That from which a thing manifests or grows.
Yeah, from what's said here, I wouldn't have gone to that, but it is said that matter is also space, which is the principle of extension. By Platonists, though. Here, matter is not equated to space, obviously, although maybe we'll get some kind of connection of those concepts. Here, it seems like he's treating matter as just like the most fundamental substrate. So one form is situated in ingredients that have another formal property, like any object out of the four elements, and then the four elements have a common substrate underneath them because they transform into each other. So there has to be something beyond that formal property that shifts, that unites the multiple formal properties, and that's where you get to eventually the ultimate substrate, matter. I don't know if the principle of that as extension is entailed in these ideas. Maybe it is, if you want to expand on like why that connection was drawn for you just now.
Well, I thought about like you bring forth a statue from stone, you bring forth a bed from wood, etc. So what is this principle that something bring forth or grows from? And I thought that matter act as a mediatory element that from which you do it.
Yeah, maybe that is entailed in the idea of matter as substrate, and he did use the example of a seed earlier, so maybe that's appropriate, and combine that with the Pythagorean idea of matter as space, and I think you're onto something, but we'll just keep going with it, and yeah, see where Simplicius takes us. And hence, likewise, matter is the subject to all other things. It is, however, essentially the subject to substance and the composite, but to other things according to accident. Okay, so matter is essentially the subject of substances and composites, but what other things is he talking about that matter is accidentally the substrate for? We'll see. Hence also Aristotle says, quote, "Thus it subsists with respect to substance and this particular individual thing, viz. To the composite, and that which is properly substance, because matter is not yet this particular thing, individual thing, though it is more so than privation." It is also worthwhile to observe that Plato, surveying matter according to its permanency, rather assigns to it tode ti, this particular individual thing, as he evinces in the formation of golden vessels, and also when he says, quote, "in which each of these appears to be ingenerated." And again, quote, "that alone can be denominated whence they perish, for in these passages he uses the appellation this, and this particular thing. But Aristotle, surveying this particular individual thing according to form, imparts the term it to forms, but after the term this particular individual thing he adds, and to being also, that is, to all things, of which some are essences, but others accidents, and some are precedenteously this particular individual thing, but others through this very term itself. Okay, this is pretty dense. And also, the Aristotle quote, where does it actually end? I guess there should have been a second end quotation mark right here at the end of this italics at this page. So that was a little confusing when Aristotle seemed to refer to himself in the third person, but it's just a missing quotation mark here. All right. So once again, so that we don't just like plow ahead without really grasping, we're gonna look at this again. Okay. So Simplicius says, "It is, however, essentially the subject to substance and the composite, but to other things according to accident." So how does matter is essentially the substrate of substance and the composite, but accidentally the substrate of other things? So maybe that's the same distinction as like clay to the pot. Clay is accidentally the matter to the pot. It's not the essential matter. The essential matter is the matter of true substances. And whether a pot would count as a true substance for Aristotle is somewhat debatable, but I think most people would say that Aristotle, in talking of ousias, actually does mean something closer to the Platonic notion of the ousia, which would not include a clay pot. A clay pot would not be an ousia for Plato, and I doubt it would be a true substance for Aristotle. It's an individual thing, but yeah, some people might kind of construe Aristotle as saying individual material things are substances. They are that of which other things are predicated, accidental properties. But especially in this connection of the way he's treating matter, I kind of doubt that that's really what Aristotle meant by substance. And maybe it is closer to the Platonic notion. So this would make sense of this sentence there in that way. So matter the true matter is essentially the substrate of substances, but also he says the composite. So I'm not sure. But to other things, according to accident, so things can be accidentally matter to other things. Hence, also Aristotle says on this, thus it subsists with respect to substance and this particular individual thing. So matter subsists for substance and this particular individual thing, viz. To the composite. So this particular individual thing is a composite object. So matter is the matter of composite objects like that. Maybe contrary to what I just said, but no, not necessarily. I was talking about the way he treats substance. So this particular individual thing here is actually contradistinguished from a substance. So a pot would be a composite, but not a composite is not necessarily a substance. So those are distinguished, but all right. We can still have matter being essentially the matter of composites as well. To the composite, and that which is properly substance. Okay. Because matter is not yet this particular individual thing, though it is more so than privation. Privation of form is not a particular material object, yet matter is closer to being a particular composite object than mere privation of form is. I guess that kind of makes sense. It is also worthwhile to observe that Plato, surveying matter according to its permanency, rather assigns to it todeti, this particular individual thing. So Aristotle is calling composite objects particular individuals. He's not calling matter a particular individual thing. Plato, treating matter as the principle of extension, principle of space, principle of individuation, calls matter the most individual thing, which makes sense. The general ontological hierarchy going from the most universal in the one down to the most particular in a particular bit of matter. So, okay, as he evinces in the formation of golden vessels, and also when he says, in which each of these appears to be and generated. And again, that alone can be denominated whence they perish, for in these passages he uses the appellation this and this particular thing. Okay, so that's the end of the, should be an end quote there of Aristotle's stuff. And now back to Simplicius. But Aristotle, surveying this particular individual thing according to form, imparts the term it to forms. But after the term this particular individual thing, he adds, and to being also, that is, to all things, of which some are essences, but others accidents, and some are precedaneously this particular individual thing, but others through this very term itself. That precedaneous containment, precedaneously being this particular individual thing, but others being this individual thing through the term itself, that is pretty obscure and difficult to parse. So we're just going to keep going and see if any light is shed on it. If it's not, probably not the end of the world. Okay. 1 second here. Plato calls this knowledge, according to analogy, spurious reasoning, in the Theaetetus, I think, because it is produced not according to the affirmation of form, but according to the denudation and negation of forms. And the reasoning power sees matter, as it were, with shut eyes, so that the intellectual perception of it is not intelligence, but rather ignorance. Hence, the phantasm of it will be spurious and not genuine, for as we know, things above the first form, not according to formal affirmation, but learning from the nature of forms, which is separate, and ought to have, prior to itself, the united in the one, and that they are not the first things. So he's saying how we know that which is super intelligible by its impression in the intelligible, so we know what is like below the intelligible matter by its analogy to what is intelligible. So we know kind of symmetrically there's a super intelligible insight into the cause of the forms, and then there's a sub-intelligible spurious insight into the absence of the forms, I guess. We know that which is above form by a negation of forms, negation not simply hurling us to its indefinite nature, but to the cause of form, and to that which is established above formal boundary. Thus also surveying ultimate forms, which are images, which change into each other, and on this account require a subject capable of receiving the opposites in succession, we arrive at the conception of matter by a negation of forms, which leads us into the receptacle of forms. But if, while investigating matter, we admit it to be some particular thing, definitely differing from other things, we shall fall upon something else, and not on matter. Okay, so was Plato really calling matter this individual particular thing? Maybe Simplicius will say he wasn't saying that. Aristotle seemed to attribute that view to him, but I couldn't recollect where in the dialogues Plato actually does call matter some, like matter itself, some individual particular thing. So matter has to be a substrate and not particular, strictly speaking. For matter has not any relative difference, since all formal difference is quality, so that the knowledge of matter is rather ignorance, since the things which are changed about it, being the last of forms, receive the last sensible knowledge. Hence, Plato says that matter is tangible with insensibility, signifying by this its resistance not according to affirmation, that he might show that as it is apprehended by a spurious reasoning, so likewise by a spurious sense. But Aristotle derived the term according to analogy from the Pythagorean Timaeus, as did also Plato the expression apprehended by a spurious reasoning. Okay, so Plato and Aristotle both took from Timaeus, Simplicius is saying, and they are meaning the same thing, according to analogy and apprehended by a spurious reasoning, I suppose. For Timaeus, in his book On the Soul of the World and Nature, says, quote, that matter is conceived by a spurious reasoning, and not yet by a direct process, but according to analogy. Of course, this is the pseudo-Timaeus document, which is probably 1st century AD, and that's clearly after both Plato and Aristotle, so Simplicius is explaining that these Plato and Aristotle got their respective concepts from this common source. In fact, it's that they had these two concepts, and then the common source actually antedates them. But still, that doesn't negate the possibility that we are dealing with the same basic idea in Plato's spurious reasoning and Aristotle's analogy. Since, however, some, and those not ignoble philosophers, say that body void of quality is the first matter, both according to Aristotle and Plato, as among the ancients, the Stoics, and among the moderns, Pericles the Lydian, it will be well to consider this opinion. So is he saying that Aristotle and Plato thought that body void of quality is the first matter? Because I think the prime matter, like matter itself, will not even be that much. I think body void of quality is like one grade up from matter itself, and Plato does reference the concept of that in the Timaeus, Theaetetus. I've said before, that sounds like a kind of quantum foam, not like formally definite, but it has a kind of extension, has a primitive bodiliness, but not definite body quite yet. But Simplicius here seems to be saying that Plato and Aristotle both treat body void of quality as the first matter. So, okay, as well as the Stoics, and then Pericles the Lydian, who I don't know who that is. In fact, let's look him up quickly. Pericles the Lydian. So an ancient Pericles, like a monarch in Lycia, not Lydia, is what came up. So maybe it would take some time to track down this other Pericles. But all right. So we don't know who that was. So for Aristotle and Plato, first introducing matter from the mutation of things which are changed, were of opinion that the qualities of the elements are the hot and the cold, the moist and the dry. But these, having a common subject body, are changed about it, so that the first matter will be body. Okay. Farther still, if there were any other subject to body, since generations are from contraries, it would be necessary that there should be some subject to body, in order that opposites may be changed about the common subject. Again, that which abides in all mutation, we say, is matter, but body void of quality abides, for there is not anything into which body can be corrupted. But that Plato says that matter is the proximate subject to the qualities of the four elements, and this is the body void of quality, is evident from the following words. The nurse of generation moist and fiery, and receiving the forms of earth and air. And again, when the demiurge began to adorn the universe, he first of all figured with forms and numbers, fire and earth, water and air, which possessed indeed certain traces of the true elements, but were in every respect so constituted as it becomes anything to be from which deity is absent. If, therefore, the demiurge has inserted in matter the first forms of the elements, and the common subject of these is body without quality, matter will be this. According to Aristotle also, matter appears to be body without quality, and the first subject. For if body, like some one of the other forms, accedes to and departs from matter, certainly prior to its acceding and after its departing from matter, there will be a privation of body about matter, which is the incorporeal. And there will be a certain physical, incorporeal essence, which was not the opinion of Aristotle, who everywhere clearly asserts that physical things are bodies, and that they subsist about bodies. So yeah, there would have to be a base incorporeal class. Obviously there are higher incorporeal things, but if body comes and goes in the substrate matter, then there would be something the contrary of body that matter receives, which is like the lower incorporeal, which, you know, I do think Plato actually does talk about, in that it's not yet definite body, but there's a bodiliness. So maybe that's the body without quality, body without shape, body without any of those things. But is it body without quantity? Because Plotinus on matter talks about how matter by itself doesn't exist, and then matter plus magnitude gives body. I believe that is what Plotinus says in that essay about matter. So yeah, let's see. Maybe Simplicius is differing from that opinion of Plotinus. But yeah, it's sufficient to know Simplicius treated Aristotle's and Plato's doctrine of matter to be body without quality. Hopefully he elaborates more on what exactly is meant by that. But okay. All right. That Plato, however, was not of opinion that body is the first subject which we call matter will be evident from this. Are we slipping into like Thomas Taylor now? Because Simplicius seems to be contradicting himself. It seems as though he said before, maybe he didn't commit himself to the idea that Plato actually did claim that matter, that body is the first subject which we call matter. Maybe, like he said, that Plato indicated that body without quality is matter to the elements, but he doesn't say that it's the first matter. That seems fair. Okay. So Simplicius is qualifying and saying, actually, Plato didn't hold that body without quality is the first thing we call matter. That'll be evident from this, that superficies, according to him, are pre-assumed as the elements of body, which superficies have a more principal subsistence than bodies. So faces are prior to three-dimensional body. So in that sense, then, body without quality did not mean body without magnitude, but body without Aristotelian qualia. Okay. But the superficies are not yet bodies, and yet they are matter to the bodies which make up the elements. He thus writes, therefore in the Timaeus, quote, in the first place, that fire and water, air and earth are bodies is evident to everyone, but every form of body also possesses depth, and there is every necessity that superficies should by nature comprehend depth. In the next place, body, according to Plato, possesses a triple interval, for this is signified by its possessing depth. So this is kind of confusing. In this quote, Plato seems to treat the triangles, the planes, as possessing depth, and therefore as bodies themselves. But Simplicius adduces this quote in evidence of the idea that Plato did not treat the superficies as bodies, but then here he gives the superficies depth precisely to show that they are bodies. So this seems a little contradictory also. We'll keep going. In the next place, body, according to Plato, possesses a triple interval, for this is signified by its possessing depth. Okay? But a thing of this kind has number co-essentialized with it, and figures, and especially if all body is finite, as it appeared to be both to Plato and Aristotle. Matter, however, says he, has of itself none of these, but when it participates of forms, then it is figured with forms and numbers. Okay, so Simplicius goes further to say that the triangles, although they do have a triple interval, these are finite magnitudes that have certain proportions, and so there are certain formal properties that the triangles already participate of, and therefore matter alone will not have these formal properties. The triangles can't just be matter. And there's no body prior to the triangles discussed in the Timaeus. So unless you're talking about this incoherent bodiliness, kind of quantum foam type concept. That Aristotle also was not of opinion that the first subject is body, he clearly evinces when he says. So it seems like Simplicius was addressing a common opinion or a possible reading wherein Plato and Aristotle held that the first subject is body without quality. Now he's saying, but if we look closer, they didn't hold that. That seems to be the way he's writing here. Quote from Aristotle. There is the same matter of a large and a small body. Okay? For the matter of body will not be body, and that which is the same subject both to the great and small will neither be great nor small. But body, and especially that which is finite, is of a certain dimension, and the same body will not be of itself at the same time great and small. In short, body is comprehended by reason and is affirmatively known, but matter, according to Plato, is comprehended by a spurious reason, and according to Aristotle, and prior to him, the Pythagorean Timaeus, by analogy alone. It is not possible, therefore, for the first matter to be body. Again, in the fourth book of these Physics, Aristotle is of opinion that matter is certain indefinite interval of magnitude, bounded by formal magnitude. He says, therefore, quote, so that place may appear to be the species and form of every thing by which magnitude and the matter of magnitude are bounded. For after having mentioned magnitude, since magnitude also is formal, he adds, by way of explanation, quote, and the matter of magnitude. Okay, this is very interesting. Aristotle is of opinion that matter is certain indefinite interval of magnitude, bounded by formal magnitude. So the matter of magnitude. magnitude is already formal, involves quantity. So I guess the principle of extension underlying formal magnitude, the substrate of formal magnitude, will be, the matter of magnitude. Magnitude is the first ingredient added to matter to yield body, according to Plotinus. So actually, Plato and Aristotle are not contradicting Plotinus. Simplicius is agreeing with Plotinus. I don't know why it was so unclear before what Simplicius's position was, but this is kind of typical of ancient authors. Generally, they will discuss multiple hypotheses, and sometimes it seems like they're advocating one thing, but no, they're like giving the thing they're arguing against. All right, so moving on. Again, to him also who considers the problem by itself, it will appear to be impossible that the first matter should be body void of quality, as also Plotinus has shown. For if no physical form is essentially inherent in matter, which is the subject to all physical forms, it is evident that neither figure nor magnitude will be inherent in it, for these are forms. And it will be invested with figure and magnitude if it is body, so that it will no longer be anything simple, but a composite from matter and form. Matter, however, is simple, so that you may syllogize as follows. Matter neither possesses of itself magnitude, nor figure, nor number. Body possesses of itself magnitude, figure, and number. Matter, therefore, is not body. Again, matter is not a composite from matter and form. Body is a composite from matter and form. Matter, therefore, is not body. Further still, if matter is body, it will have a certain proper magnitude, and the demiurge will no longer have produced all forms from himself according to his own will, because the matter is already there that the demiurge uses. So he didn't produce all forms because some were inherent in the matter already, nor nature according to demiurgic reasons. But actually that would be okay in a certain sense, in that necessity versus intelligence is treated as a kind of form-matter dichotomy in the cause of things, and necessity, ananke, could be interpreted as like inherent properties that the matter possesses. Just a possible counter argument, not that I even subscribe to that myself. But, okay. More arguments why matter is not simply body, nor nature according to demiurgic reasons in herself, but she will necessarily be subservient to the magnitude of matter. Okay. Again, if matter has magnitude, it will also have figure in the definition of it. This, therefore, is not only absurd, because figure is form and quality, but because matter will be unadapted to receive every figure in consequence of being vanquished by one certain definite figure. Further still, the form which proceeds into matter brings with it everything appropriate, so that it also brings with it magnitude. For there is one magnitude of a man, another of a bird, and of such a particular bird. Neither magnitude, therefore, nor quantity will be the property of matter, and hence matter will not be body. Again, if matter is body, it will be a certain quantum, and endued with magnitude, but a quantum is one thing, and quantity another, and that which is endued with magnitude is different from magnitude itself, and incorporeal forms are simple, but the participants of these are composites. If, therefore, matter is body, it will be something composite, and not simple, nor an element. But if these things are absurd, we must say that quantity, being received by matter, imparts magnitude, which prior to this was not inherent in matter. Just as quality, being participated, makes that to be quale, which before was void of quality. Farther still, body consists from genus and differences, for it is an essence with a triple interval. But a thing of this kind is form and not matter. Again, body is divided contrary to incorporeal qualities, but matter subsists similarly with respect to all things. Body also is defined by certain intervals, but matter is perfectly indefinite. Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. We're still in another Simplicius quote on the nature of matter. And Simplicius, as is to be expected, is reconciling the Platonic and Aristotelian account of matter, and agreeing with the Platinian account as well. So again, not sure like why that was so confusing before, where it seemed he was saying the opposite, but that's fine. We're on track now, and we will pick up tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central. So thanks everybody. I will go ahead and stop the stream.